Oh, you're here already? I haven't barely even started. That big of a Beatles fan, are we? Hello and welcome back to Vinyl Friday, where I go through my records in alphabetical order like a big nerd and talk about why I love them. This week is a Revolver Odyssey week. We've covered the first two tracks on side B, so the song that we're going to be listening to today is, in the words of Elvis Costello, about as perfect a record as you could make. And it sounds like this. Ugh. Buddy.
Your day breaks, your mind aches.
Now I will admit, the title of today's video was a tad hyperbolic. Perhaps a more appropriate title would be something like, That Time That Beatle Paul and his sidekick George Martin traveled back in time and made significant advances in the development of baroque pop as a music genre. But there is a character limit on titles, so we do what we have to, right? Before we get really stuck in, I'd like to offer a disclaimer for this episode. We are going to be wading into the realm of classical music, and when I have done this in previous episodes, the music theory purists have gotten their knickers in a right tangle and taken to the comment section because I've used the word write instead of compose, or song instead of piece, bridge instead of middle eight. But the fact is, I am not in the habit of arguing with pedants because I feel like that detracts from the joy of music, which is what I am here to proselytize. So let's do that. My aim here is to answer 4 questions today. 1, what is baroque music? 2, what is baroque pop music? 3, what does this have to do with the Beatles? And 4, what does this have to do with today's song in particular? And then I'd like to pontificate a little bit about the lyrics, because this song has some of the most heartbreaking lyrics, I think, of any Beatles song. Let's begin! Question 1, what is baroque music? Well, it was the dominant form of Western music between a period of about 1600 to 1750, which was the year that one of its foremost composers, Bach, died. So I suppose in an alternate reading you could say that Bach was the single thing that was holding back the development of Western music. Seriously though, don't come for me, music theorists. I'm sorry. It's just a little harmless fun. It was important for a number of reasons. For example, it sort of consolidated the idea of writing music in a major or a minor key. Prior to this point, music was being written in modes as opposed to major or minor keys. You'll find that we are actually still using this system in modern music, except for Miles Davis, but that man follows no one's rules. Baroque music essentially invented the bass line. Again, prior to this point in music, pieces didn't really have a bass line. So really, again, we can trace today's bass lines back to Baroque music. Also, it developed the idea of the orchestra, basically taking a bunch of different instruments with different unique voices, grouping them together, but having them do different things, serve different purposes within that group, creating like a family of different sounds. And that really expanded the possibilities of what you could do in composing a piece of music. Again, still in use today. Among many other things, Baroque music is defined by elements like counterpoint, which is when you have different melody lines artfully intertwining, weaving in and out within a piece of music. For example, if you listen to the following piece, you'll be able to hear that there are 2 distinct voices and they are interacting with each other but doing different things. Another major feature in Baroque music is scalic melodies. Don't panic, it's actually very simple. It just means that the melodies of the pieces are based around a scale. A major scale, a minor scale, etc. We'll come back to this later when we get to talking about this song. Yes. For the purposes of today's episode, that is enough of an overview. But if you're new to Baroque music and you want to learn more about it, I cannot recommend enough that you don't read up on it, because it's simultaneously very vague and overwhelmingly dry. Instead, I think you should listen to the music of Bach, because it is arguably the genesis of modern popular music. And with that, I invite the purists to enter the comment section now and argue with me or each other. I think I'll be entertained either way. Question 2. What is Baroque pop? This is a bit more in my wheelhouse. It's a genre that essentially fuses elements of classical music with elements of popular music. Boom. Fused. I didn't want to say that Paul McCartney or the Beatles invented Baroque pop because there were precursors to what the Beatles were doing with the genre. For example, Phil Spector was using really ornate orchestral arrangements in his music in the early 60s, like You've Lost That Love and Feeling.
For you.
And then you've got the Beach Boys, who I would say, alongside the Beatles, were central to this subgenre of popular music. Indeed, I would say that Pet Sounds is almost like a Baroque pop concept album. For instance, if you ever listen to a song like When I Grow Up to Be a Man, there is harpsichord in it. Harpsichord, of course, being an instrument that was very commonly used in Baroque music. And in fact, musicians in the 60s just took the harpsichord and went nuts with it. Here's a montage of musicians going nuts with harpsichords in the mid-60s.
For your love. Just walk away, Renee. Everybody's hustling just to tell her to make me a kind of rich. Monday, It's been a long time since I last set eyes on the church.
That last track by the Kinks also has this very Baroque trill right about here in the track. I would make the argument that this branching out of popular music into less traditional forms, well, less traditional for rock music, more traditional for Western music as a whole, was part of the psychedelic movement, that drive to create and discover new sounds and incorporate them into rock music. But what does this have to do with the Beatles? This is an episode about the Beatles, right? Yes, it is. The Beatles were hugely influential in the development of Baroque pop as a genre. And here I have to mention an unsung hero of the Beatles constellation, and that is George Martin. I know that people know who he is and recognize the work that he did for the Beatles, but I still feel like he's underrated. I still feel like he deserves more attention and more credit, because it was George Martin in 1965 who suggested to Paul McCartney that he have strings on the track Yesterday. And at the time, Paul McCartney was really reluctant. He said to George, and I quote, "I don't want Mantovani." To the uninitiated, this is what Mantovani sounds like. So George Martin proposed a string quartet because it would be a little bit more modest and maybe understated by comparison against a full orchestra.
Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be.
They had never played a track where only one of them was on it, and there was no conventional rock instrumentation. There was an acoustic guitar, but apart from that, everything else was a string quartet. Unprecedented! Who would have thought the Beatles would do something unprecedented? They're so predictable, usually. Later in 1965, on Rubber Soul, George Martin contributed this solo in the song In My Life. Now, there's more on this in the episode I did on In My Life, but essentially what happened is that John Lennon had written the entire song except for this one bit, and he wasn't sure what to put there, so he said to George Martin, put something Baroque sounding in it. And George Martin wrote a piece that was composed, whatever. A piece that was inspired by Bach, but he couldn't actually play it at the speed of the recording. So he played it slower and then sped up the tape to match the speed of the rest of the song. And that ended up making the piano sound a little bit like a harpsichord. So essentially there are a couple of songs, When I Grew Up to Be a Man being one of them, that preceded In My Life. But following that point, there were harpsichords everywhere, and I would put a lot of that down to the sound that George Martin had achieved on In My Life. Of course, that's not necessarily provable. That's just my take. I'm just a person on the internet with a camera, and too much to say about the Beatles. Indeed, some might argue that I'm doing this because my friends and family got sick of hearing about it. In any case, that solo that George Martin contributed to In My Life gives the song a very old-timey feel, which is perfect because it's about nostalgia. Well done, George Martin. In the first 3 months of 1966, the Beatles had their little sabbatical where they weren't on tour, they didn't need to be in the studio, they weren't filming anything, and they all went their separate ways and got to develop a little bit as individuals. Paul chose to spend that time consuming classical music, so when they got back in the studio in the spring of that year, he was primed and ready to go on this classical stuff in a way that he hadn't been a year earlier. He was ready to try new things, and he was ready to apply some of the interesting sounds that he had been soaking up in the first 3 months of the year. George Martin was there in the wings, ready to provide the technical know-how to translate that vision into Beatles music. That's how we ended up with masterpieces like Eleanor Rigby,
Father Mackenzie, wiping the dirt from his hands as he walks from the grave.
and For No One. But question 4, and at this point I don't remember the exact wording I used at the beginning of the video, but basically what does Baroque music have to do with the song For No One? Well, I'm gonna tell you right now. First off, the instrumentation. On this song, Paul McCartney plays not only a piano, but also a clavichord. What is a clavichord, you ask? An excellent question, and to answer that, we're going to go now to our field correspondent. Thank you very much, Anchor. Hello, Internet. I would like to introduce to you my friend Paul, who is not only a colleague of mine, but also one of my favorite people on the planet, and I feel very fortunate that our timelines have overlapped. Say hello, Paul.
Hi there.
Tell the Internet, what is it that you do for work?
Yeah, basically I build and restore historic keyboard instruments. So harpsichords, early pianos, and clavichords. That is basically what I do.
Basically what
So
you
building new instruments and also restoring old ones.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And making all the components that go with them.
Sorry, we didn't quite catch that.
Oh. and making all the components that go with them.
And what do we have behind us today?
So this is just a little clavichord. It's here for repairs, and probably made in the 1960s. Yeah, what more can one say? I mean, it's a little mass-produced clavichord from the 60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you explain how it works?
Right, okay. This is probably the simplest and arguably the most expressive keyboard instrument there is.
Okay.
Dating back to the sort of 1400s. It's also the oldest keyboard instrument.
Right. I didn't know that.
So, and the action is simplicity itself. The key is like a seesaw. On the end it has a brass part called a tangent, so called because it touches the string from tango, tangeray, teddy, tactum, and Latin to touch.
Wow, we're learning so much today.
So, you depress the key, the tangent hits the string, and the string starts vibrating between the tangent and the bridge on the soundboard.
Right.
And
So it effectively creates a bridge at the other end of the
it
string.
does. The tangent is the other bridge.
Right.
But because that's also the point at which the string is caused to vibrate, it can only produce a very small amount of volume because there's very little string excursion at that point. So that's a sort of typical volume.
In order to record this on the Beatles track, they'd have had to
Closely
mic
mic'd.
it very, very closely.
They would have done.
The clavichord track on the song has a very tinny, trebly tone to it.
They can sort of sound a bit like a sort of bee in a bottle.
Right. Yes, it's
You know,
sort
that
of
sort
buzzy.
of buzzy sound.
Yes. And
And-
for years I thought it was a harpsichord on the
Right.
recording. I only just learned that it was a clavichord.
Yeah.
Actually, on Friday when I texted you
I'm
and asked if you had
amazed.
one.
Yeah, I had no idea they used them.
Yeah, harpsichords had a huge heyday in the 1960s. Do you know the
That's
song
lovely.
Monday Monday?
Yes.
Yeah, that's got a harpsichord
Oh,
on
really?
it.
It's so long since I've heard it. I must have a listen again.
Okay, I can facilitate that.
I'm sure you can. Yeah.
So unlike a piano which has a quite complicated action, a series of different mechanisms to get the hammer to strike the string to produce
Yep.
sound, this is
This
basically
has-
the opposite. It's just
Basically,
a
it has
seesaw.
no action. It's just the key
Right.
with the tangent on the end. And sounds as long as the key is held down. So you can do that with it too. You can get that.
A bit of vibrato.
Well, yeah, exactly. Which the Germans call Bebung, which
That's
is
a great name.
exactly, which is sort of quaking. Sort of.
Okay. That's so
So
cool.
you can do quite interesting things with it. It's superior to the piano and the harpsichord in that respect.
Right.
That you've got complete control over what you do with the string. Pianos
Very
do
cool.
pretty well when they're properly regulated.
Yeah, no, they do okay.
Yeah,
but
yeah, they do.
They've got nothing on clavichords.
No.
Right.
Doesn't exactly do big concert or public concert with one of these.
No.
It just simply wouldn't be heard. But composers like Mozart and those people, their idea was that once you can play everything with all the expression that you want on the clavichord, the rest is easy, because they are quite demanding to play.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Simplicity in its mechanism, but
yeah,
extremely complicated
that's
to
right.
master. I find that they can be quite tricky to tune because it's so easy to bend the string sharp. Yes. So would you say they fell out of favour at some point?
They were used right into the early 19th century.
Into
people
the
like
20th,
Mozart,
if the Beatles are anyone
to
go by.
That's true.
If you don't mind, we'll have a listen to the song and you can tell me what you think.
Oh yeah, sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so as far as you know, you've never heard this song.
As far as I know, I've never heard it, yes.
Great.
I have no recollection of having heard it.
Okay.
Put it that way.
It sounds like this. That's the song.
Very good.
Did you enjoy it?
I did.
You did?
It's very good.
Great.
I was listening for the clavichord. But it's in there somewhere.
It is. It is. It's very nicely mixed in with the piano, so it sounds like the piano has that buzzy
like
sort of trebly sound to it.
Yeah.
Which I think is why I thought it was a harpsichord.
Yes.
It's got a little bit more body and volume that way.
Yeah.
But so that's the song that this week's episode is about.
Nice one.
I think that's everything I need from you.
For now.
Yes, for now, for today.
Yeah.
I'll be in touch.
Okay. Good.
Back to you.
Yeah.
The rhythm section is very understated. The bass is quite quiet in the mix, and the drums start out barely even there. Right at the top of the song, you've got sort of like a heartbeat of a kick drum.
Your day breaks, your mind aches, you
Cocoon. Cocoon. Like Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing.
It's a feeling, a heartbeat. Cocoon.
Cocoon. One of my favourite things about the song is that percussion does build throughout the song so that it becomes increasingly like agonized and desperate. So the tambourine comes in somewhere around the middle of the song.
She says that long ago she knew some.
By the end we've got quite a lot more of Ringo. Here.
There were times when
Okay, that last verse feels a lot fuller. I'm digressing from my main point. Let's return to it now. This track also has a bit of brass on it. Here. The Storytime correspondent will tell us more about this now. Good day to you. We will be taking today's reading from Here, There and Everywhere by Jeff Emmerich. A controversial figure in the Beatles community, but he does have some interesting tales to spin, so. Another memorable incident occurred when Alan Civil, formerly of the London Philharmonic, and then the principal horn player of the BBC's Symphony Orchestra, was brought in to add French horn to Paul's haunting song, For No One. Alan was under a lot of pressure doing that overdub because it was so hard to hit the high note in the solo. In fact, most people would have never written that part for a French horn player because it was too high to play. But that was the note Paul wanted to hear, and so that was the note he was going to get. We felt that Alan, being the best horn player in London, could actually hit it, even though most horn players couldn't. Alan was reluctant to Alan was reluctant to even try it. He was actually breaking into a sweat, telling everyone it really shouldn't be done. But eventually he gave it a go and pulled it off. Though Alan was a wreck by the time he left that session, he was well pleased with what he'd done because it was the performance of his life. That was the high note there. Next, I think there are a number of baroque compositional elements of the song as well. You'll remember the thing I said about scalic melodies, I hope, at the beginning of the episode. Scalic melodies. It just means that the melodies of the pieces are based around a scale. And that is something that this song uses. Piano correspondent? Hello! Good to see you again. Now if you take the verse of this song, you notice that the bass is playing a scale. This is an example of the kind of descending scale melody you might find in a piece of baroque music. An excellent example, which is basically the same as this, is Air on a G string. This descending scale melody is actually very common in popular music now. For example, the oh-so-popular song from the 1960s, Whiter Shade of Pale, by Procol Harum, was influenced by Air on a G-string. If you listen to them together, they sound very similar.
We skip the light fandango. Turned cartwheels across the floor. I was feeling kind of seasick.
And it's exactly the same chord sequence as Paul McCartney is using in For No One. For No One goes, your day breaks, your mind aches, you find that all are words of kindness. Whiter Shade of Pale goes, we skip the light fandango, turning cartwheels across the floor. And there are tons of songs that have this chord sequence. Here are just a few. Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? Turn and face the strange changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes. Yes, I've been broken hearted. Blue since the day we parted. Why did I ever let you go? I light the fire. You'll place the flowers in the vase that you bought today. Telling that it's human nature. Why? Sing us a song, you're the piano man. Sing us a song tonight. The Beatles themselves have even used it multiple times. In Penny Lane, there is a barber showing photographs of every head. Hello, hello. I don't know why you say goodbye. I say your day breaks, your mind aches, and so on. We've been listening to this for like 400 or 500 years, and it's still fresh. I still enjoy that chord sequence. And obviously you do too, because you're here and you would otherwise probably not be very interested in this episode. There's also the concept of contrary motion, which is when you've got one of the melodic voices ascending a scale, and at the same time that the other is descending a scale. Or the other way around, where they go this way. So this way, or this way. Either way, they're moving contrary to each other. And there's some of that in this song. And in her eyes, you see nothing. No sign of love behind her tears. Cry for no one. A love that should have lasted years. And the last thing that I can identify is the use of counterpoint, which, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is when you've got distinct melodic voices that are weaving in and out of each other. And obviously there's some of that in what the piano correspondent just showed us. It also occurs in this song when they bring the French horn back in at the end, because then you've got the melody of the horn weaving in with Paul McCartney's vocal melody.
There will be times when all things.
Isn't that lovely? They complement each other in this very artful way. So that is, in essence, everything that I have to say about the music, but that's not all that there is to this song, because this song's lyrics are brilliant. Truly some of Paul McCartney's best work, I think. It is so profoundly sad. It was written after he had a fight with his then-girlfriend Jane Asher. I was not there, but from what I can tell, the central conflict of their relationship seemed to be that she wanted to be more independent and to have a career as a stage actress, whereas he wanted her to stay at home and take on a more traditional role as his girlfriend. I'm Team Jane on this one. And so the gist of the song is that there is an unrequited love within an established relationship. It reminds me of a song called All of a Sudden by XTC. And also of The Dangling Conversation by Simon and Garfunkel.
And I only kiss your shadow. I cannot feel your hand. You're a stranger now unto me.
In which the singer realizes that what had previously been a companionable silence in his relationship with his partner had gradually become just silence, and there was nothing left. and it had happened in a way that he hadn't realized. Like that, this is a song about growing up and growing apart, and suddenly finding that your partner doesn't love you the way that they used to. In that way, I think that this song is so much sadder than one about an explosive end to a relationship. It's like something disappeared and it was just totally outside of your control. The lyrics of this song just run the gamut of all of the feelings that might be involved in that, like resentment, which you can hear in this line.
A love that should have lasted years.
That should have lasted years. Did not. Or this one here.
You stay home, she goes out.
You stay home, she goes out. Knowing the context of their relationship, that he wanted her to be the one who stayed at home while he went out, there's this sort of undercurrent of resentment. She should be here with me, and she's going off doing whatever she wants. There's disbelief.
You want her, you need her, and yet you don't believe her when she says her love is dead. You think she needs you.
Maybe instead of disbelief, it's willful ignorance. It's all within the same family. You've got the grief of searching for anything in your partner's eyes and instead finding
no sign of love behind the tears.
no sign of love. Nothing there. Nothing left. And then there's that haunting nostalgia of what the relationship had been at some point.
You find that all her words of kindness linger on when she no longer needs you.
You can also hear it in this line.
There will be times when all the things she said will fill your head. You won't forget her.
And in that last line of that last verse, "you won't forget her," there is acceptance. He accepts that it's all over. Of course it wasn't. They stayed together for a couple of years after this. I think she even went to India with him. So maybe he was just being a melodramatic baby. Whatever the case, I think it's one of Paul McCartney's most beautiful compositions, or songs, or pieces of music, whatever you might want to call it. It's stunning. That's it from me. If you enjoyed this episode, or you would like to support any of the weird things that I do, I'll leave a link in the description to my Buy Me a Coffee page where you are welcome to make a donation, but no pressure, friends. Thank you to everyone who has made a donation or signed up as a member. I appreciate you so very much. And all going well, next week there will be a very, very special guest. I look forward to it. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend! There will be times when all the things she says will fill your head. You won't forget her. Hello and welcome back to Vital... Hey. God, you're shedding so much today, friend. Maybe I'm just noticing it because I'm wearing my favorite velvet jacket. Nope, we're not going to feature that. We're going to cut that out. You know what? I do think this scarf was a faff in the end. Maybe it wasn't a good idea. But it's so fetching. And in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind it. Back to torment me some more. With your relentless fluff. I'll accept it. Because you're pretty cool. But that's the only reason. Through to the 19th. That boring. Try again. No offense, me. That's okay, none taken. A love that should have lasted years. Boom, boom.
What do we get in the background? All sorts of things.
All sorts of things. And yet you don't believe her when she says her love is dead. You think she needs you. Thank you for your time, Paul. I'll give you a hug and then I'll run off and...
Gotta go and do things, of course.
That's right. Things to do.
Good to see you, Nancy.
Good to see you.
Yeah,
always
as
good
always.
to see you.
Snap.
Jinx. I was feeling kind of seasick. The crowd called out for more.